more versed at it since I didn't go to film school. And so I worked as an editor for a while. I worked as a writer. I ended up as a post-production supervisor at a small studio run by Ralph Bakshi. I don't know if any of you remember him, very famous animator from the 70s and 80s. And he was he got the rights to Mighty Mouse, and we were making the New Adventures of Mighty Mouse for CBS at the time. And went to work there as a post supervisor, and the Mighty Mouse was canceled. I went over to Disney Features at that point because I figured, okay, there, if I really want to learn the process, there's where they dissect it. They don't send it overseas. They do everything in house, and it's a lot of attention to detail, and really got to understand every aspect of animation, technical and creative. And I was working, this was the beginning of Disney feature animation. It was the, it was when we were just building the pipeline to do the once a year movie. And so I worked on Oliver and Company and then The Little Mermaid. And at that point I got a call from the guy who was running the small studio that I'd worked at prior. And he said, okay, I can't handle Ralph anymore. You're the only person I know who can do the job and handle Ralph. What, do you want to come run the studio? And I was I think I like 21, 22 by that point. I was like, oh, I run a studio? Sure, I can do that. So it was too good of an opportunity. I went ahead and moved over there, and it was actually an awesome experience. Learned a ton from crazy old Ralph, and did a Butter Battle special for Nickelodeon, which was the Dr. Seuss. So we got to work with him weekly, which, hang out at his house and see the places you'll go as he was writing it and illustrating it. So it was pretty cool experience. I'll never forget. I guess most notably, we had a lot of really talented people, directors, artists, etc. And at one point we had a layoff, and all of my artists went to a little known studio or unknown studio in Hollywood. And one day I got a call from one of them, Rich Moore. Actually, he just won 2 Oscars the last 3 years. But he's a director at the time, and he called me and he said, Sherry, we really need you. Will you come help us out? And so, I got the call and I went over there, and it turned out it was Klasky Csupo. It was this little animation studio on Highland and Fountain. And it was sorry, I'm getting a call, and for some reason it's connecting to my computer. Let me decline it. Okay, got it. And so at that point, they were just going from, it was The Simpsons, and they were just going from shorts to TV series for the first time. And so they were, it was a little studio. They really didn't know what they were doing. They got the job because they underbid it. And they had 13 people working in a hallway, and they just weren't getting it done. And Gracie Films wasn't happy with what was coming out. And they're like, will you come figure this out with us? And, at first, actually, I have to be honest, I was, getting the tour, and Rich was part of it. And I said to him, like, Rich, these are really ugly characters. Who's going to watch this thing? And, and he said, read the script. He goes, I know, but read the script. And so I asked if I could read the script and let them know in the morning. And it was honestly the funniest script I'd ever read, probably to date. Simpsons scripts were brilliantly written. I said, I'm in. And so that sort of really launched my career in that, I was coming in to produce The Simpsons, which was, no one knew much about it, but soon became a massive mega hit. And there was a lot to figure out because you had live action people wanting to rewrite the show the night before air, and animation takes 6 months to do. You had a sitcom in animation for the first time on television, so it wasn't action oriented, and it was different kind of staging, different kind of acting for the characters, and it was very difficult to find the right kind of people to work on it. So there were a lot of hurdles, a lot of challenges, but ultimately, you know, it was a huge success, and sort of set up the way that primetime animation is now produced. And then a few months into that, a Nickelodeon executive walked in and said, "Hey, we're starting a new kids animation original block. You know, will you guys come up with something for us?" And we pitched them, you know, how about life from the point of view of babies? And they said, "Okay, go." God, if it were only that easy from there on out, right? But it was, you know, an opportunity to do an original series for the studio, and we you know, that became the big franchise that is Rugrats. And so at that point, Gabor Chupo, the owner of the studio, had asked me if I would just run the studio and basically oversee all of the production, not just produce the main show. And so I was supervised, produced Rugrats, and you know, in all of the special projects and other series that we were doing. And then I produced Simpsons, I produced Duckman. I don't know if any of you remember that one. It's on USA Network, was on USA Network at the time with Paramount. So, and we did a bunch of other shows. So I was there for about 6 or 7 years. And at that point, I got a call from a recruiter that Turner bought Hanna-Barbera and was starting a 24/7 cartoon network. And they wanted me to come in and basically overhaul the studio into a hit-making machine. And they said, they haven't come up with a hit in 10 years, but do whatever you need to do, but we need hits in a year. And as Ted Turner, and I'm going to quote him now, said to me at the time was, I want to kick Nickelodeon's butt in the ratings. And it was like, in a year, I don't know. By then, Nickelodeon was sort of the dominant kids network and had all these great original series, and we had no development time and no nothing. But we did have a network and a studio and a lot of resources. So ultimately, we came up with a way to produce a lot of shows in a short amount of time, and that was the What a Cartoon shorts. And basically each half hour had 3 7-minute pilots in it, and each pilot was to test out a new show. But it was basically done in the course of a series because we didn't have time to do pilots, test them, and then decide to go to series on them. So out of that program, we got Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, Cow and Chicken, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Butch Hartman, who later created Fairly Odd Parents, and Seth MacFarlane, who's Family Guy creator, all came out of that program. So it was very successful. It was a lot of fun. And we launched the Cartoon Network and did beat Nickelodeon in the ratings. And so it was a pretty incredible feat. But all good things must come to an end. Fast forward 3 years later, we merged with Time Warner, and somebody upstairs said, "Oh, just combine the animation studios from, you know, Warner Brothers Animation and Hanna-Barbera. We don't need two." And I had just finished building this amazing, you know, creative pipeline that went from pilot to series seamlessly, and Warner Brothers was structured totally differently and just wasn't going to work. And so instead of watching it die in front of me, I just chose to exit at that point and take my buyout, and then followed my then boss to Nickelodeon, started a movie division for them. And then actually it was a direct-to-video movie division. And I was there for a couple years, finishing up the movies, and then the first two that we started, and then I got a call from Fox. You know, the network just picked up this show from this young kid, and we can't have it cost what the Simpsons cost. Seriously? Well, I don't know what's going on. Sorry about that. Sounds like an alarm. Jeez, I'm so sorry. I can't hear myself think. So the unknowns of the Zoom world, right?
Right.
So my office faces the street. Oh, thank God. Okay. So we live in a very quiet neighborhood, actually. I don't know what that was. Anyway, ultimately the show was Family Guy, and they didn't want it to cost what Simpsons cost, and they wanted an animation person on their end. Usually they were just farming it out to an animation studio. At that point, the head of Fox had worked with me on Simpsons, and he goes like, I want you to work for us on the Fox side and oversee the animation and everything else. And so ultimately I built Fox's first in-house animation studio for prime time. And we produced 3 seasons of Family Guy before it got canceled. I don't know if many of you remember that, but it did get
Hard time. I
canceled.
remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it got canceled, and it was picked up 5 years later. But anyway, I went on to produce several more things, amongst it Looney Tune shorts for theatrical release, as well as many primetime pilots. I was sort of the go-to for primetime pilots at that time. And at that point, I kind of was like, all right, been there, done that. What's next? I really kind of ready for the next challenge. There's a lot of consolidation in the industry. And so I went, I signed up for the executive MBA at USC, and decided to start, an entrepreneurship venture. So I started my first venture in building a kids virtual world. I was it was literally the very, very beginning of it. And it became a very hot area at the time. All VCs wanted to invest in it. And we were able to raise money and build a site that got an acquisition offer from Viacom. Followed that with a second site. By then, though, everything went mobile, and that was the death of virtual worlds. So that one was not did not end up going anywhere. And then I created a line of dolls who were pop stars. And the idea that I had was like, well, kids are playing everywhere, so why not reach and engage them on every platform? So it's now called multi-platform, but it was sort of like before that trend. And so I thought, well, why don't I create a consumer product that I can create content for? And I teamed up with a platinum selling writer producer who writes for Kesha and One Direction, Matt Carney, many, many other stars, and to create original music sung by top studio musicians. And the dolls were the pop stars, so I owned all the music, which was pretty amazing. And then created a bunch of YouTube webisodes of backstories of the girls, and they were 12-inch tall in a real world. So they're plastic and they're 12 inches tall, but they live in our world. They have a real life manager, etc. And so our YouTube channel skyrocketed into the millions right away, and the music was being downloaded. And I thought, well, let me see what these are worth. And I took the dolls to Toys R Us, and the buyer flipped out over all of it and put an order in, and did the same thing with Justice for Girls. And that buyer made an order. So I'm like, oh shit, I guess I'm making dolls. I better learn something about that. And so I got a couple of investors, hired some toy people around me so that I'd know what I was doing, and opened up a Hong Kong office to oversee manufacturing in China. We had sales reps all over the country, and ultimately got into retail everywhere that sold toys, as well as in 13 other countries. We stumbled on our third season with sort of go big or go home. I actually got the Target and Walmart orders, but at that point, MGA decided to relaunch Bratz and announced that they're going to spend $20 million in TV advertising, which of course I could not compete with. And I didn't want to die in retail because once you're dead in retail, you're done. So at that point, I closed down the toy company and sort of shifted my company into a media focused company. I was like, I got to do what I know how to do, and basically teamed up with, I went to MIPCOM in Cannes, teamed up with, had a bunch of proposals from international distribution partners, teamed up with a German company called M4E, and they funded development of the series and ultimately a pilot. And now sort of at the place where I've got to find a home for the pilot, got to find a home for the series. And I've created a bunch of other TV shows, all animated, and you know, from preschool all the way to prime time. So that's where I'm at.
Thank you
So,
so much for that.
wasn't short, sorry.
No, I've heard you tell the story before, and brief was the wrong word, but at the same time, it's all fascinating, and so I'm thank you for going through it. So we're actually going to start with our first official poll to direct where we're going to head. While we pop up the poll on the screen, I'm going to throw some lightning round questions at you. I totally stole this idea from Rabbi Sarani, so you'll appreciate that. Favorite movie right now?
Oof. Movie. Oh boy. I just watched all the screeners towards the end of the year, and I haven't really seen any movies since then, to be honest. I honestly did not have I thought there were some decent movies this year. There weren't any, in my opinion, there weren't any Oscar winners this year. And I know it's harsh, but that's how I felt about it. But God, there's so many wonderful movies. I can't give you one.
Fair enough. I tried. Okay,
Yeah.
so, we got the results in. It looks like people want to hear about the stories behind the shows that you have worked on in the past. So I guess we'll have to do another one with your career trajectory as part 2 maybe sometime.
Sure.
So you mentioned Simpsons already, and obviously that was the real launch, like you said. When did you know it was going to be as big as it became?
So prior to me even going there, the reason that it got picked up to series is that it started out as shorts on the Tracy Ullman show on Fox. And Fox was a brand new network, was really barely on the map. It had Married with Children, which was starting to take off at the time. And it had this show called The Tracy Ullman Show, which is she's a comedian and entertainer, if any of you don't remember. And Jim Brooks, who's a very famous executive producer, writer, a brilliant writer and creator, did Terms of Endearment, tons and tons of movies, did the Mary Tyler Moore Show, and he was the creator behind the Tracy Ullman Show. And he wanted to spice it up and bring up ratings. And so he was a fan of Matt Groening's. And so he had reached out to Matt Groening and said, hey, can we have Life in Hell to put on here as just black and white little comic strips? And, Matt tells the story that he literally dropped the phone. He couldn't believe that Jim Brooks had called him. And he's a little animator out of, or not even animator, he's just a, comic strip guy out of Oregon at the time. And he came down to meet with them. But then when he found out that he was going to have to give up the rights to Life in Hell, he goes, God, I've been doing this since college. This is my bread and butter. I know it's not much, but it's like it's my livelihood. So he goes, but I can come up with another show that has the same sensibilities. And Jim Brooks said, fine, because it's kind of based on my family. And actually I've met Lisa and I've met, so he's Bart. So it's, he just on a napkin drew the bird-like, actually the overbite was a beak initially, the characters on a napkin, and they went in and Fox said, sure, whatever, as long as it doesn't cost more, just go ahead and put it on the show. So it was, it was meant to be these little black and white comic strips. And they went to Klasky Csupo, which was a very creative young studio that, run by 2 artists, and they wanted to make it more than just a comic strip. They were animators. So they put 3 young animators on it. Their color artist said, oh, I'm going to make them yellow. That'd be kind of cool. And so, hence they animated all the shorts themselves. And so what happened was the shorts thing ran out. And the fans started writing into Fox going, what the heck? What happened to those shorts? That's the only reason I was even watching the Tracy Ullman Show. Bring those shorts back. And the network decided to go ahead and make a series based on that. like, well, if it's not popular, let's just do a series on it. And that's when they brought in Sam Simon and the, you know, team of writers, and really expanded the characters into more than they were in the shorts. So it was already kind of getting like noticed, even when they were little shorts on the Tracy Ullman show. But pretty shortly after we went on the air, ratings started to soar. Fox was becoming a legitimate network because of us and Married with Children. It was sort of, we were the two shows that really launched the network. And it was fairly quick. It was in the first season that people really started to talk about it, and the ratings were shooting way up. And remember, Fox was a fourth network to the three networks that had been around for decades. And so it didn't have very much ratings. It didn't have, you know, a big following or whatever. And so all of a sudden it did. And the ratings were starting to, you know, to match those of the networks, which was massive for them. So anyway.
Going a little bit more on The Simpsons, just because I think it's timely right now. They clearly can predict the future. We know that. I want to know where they're hiding their time machine that the writers.
So all I can tell you is, when you have a show that's really well written and is real, it has real characters that are true to real personalities and real life, and stories that really touch pop culture and current society or whatever, the way that The Simpsons do, it just happens. You're inevitably going to hit upon it. And I actually have an interesting segue from that that I like to tell, because I do get asked this quite often. There was, when I was working on the Looney Tunes shorts, again, our entire goal was to go back to the original shorts. Were very, they were way edgier than like Animaniacs, and they weren't kids cartoons. They were edgy, satirical, sometimes political cartoons for adults. And so when we were doing the theatrical shorts, we really kind of wanted to reestablish that. And so I had all like primetime writers who had written on King of the Hill and Simpsons, and and some of the top directors, and we were really kind of just putting up story pictures up in writing the stories in the writer's room, rather than just out of script, because that was really much more action oriented and true to the way that they used to be done. And we ended up with 3 separate occasions where the exact same thing we had in the cartoon happened, and it wasn't a good thing. And we literally had to redo the cartoon because it was the main gag. So we had one where Bugs has this hole in the desert, and Yosemite Sam is a builder. He's building all these casinos around him, and Bugs is pissed off, so he like blows up in one of the casinos. And so a chase ensues, and we literally have them running through the Vegas, through Paris, and and New York, and they were just kind of running through in Bellagio. And so they're running through all the casinos, and then culminating with Bugs ducks into a chapel and marries a tiger. And then he walks out, and then as soon as Yosemite Sam comes in, he runs out, and there's a guy walking his tiger, and he goes, "Oh, thanks for the tiger, Doc." And the guy goes, "Das ist not my tiger." And the tiger proceeds to mull him over. And that literally came back from Korea, because we would do the key animation here, and they would go get painted in Korea and shot or whatever. And literally the color just came back. And Siegfried was mauled by the tiger. And so it was like, oh my God, we can't have that joke in there. It would look like we did it making fun of him, and we had to change it. And then there was another cartoon where it was supposed to go in front of the Harry Potter movie. And so we had Coyote and Roadrunner, and Coyote goes into the atmosphere on a magic broom, and then he burns upon reentry to the atmosphere. And yeah, it was literally right when the space shuttle burned upon reentry to the atmosphere. And so I actually got a call from the head of the chairman of Warner Brothers. He was the head of features, and he called me up, and I'm like, oh my God, why is he calling me? This is like, it wasn't a typical, daily thing that happened. And I go, I wonder what I did. So I pick up and I go, hi, Jeff, what can I do for you? And he's like, do you have a executive dying in one of your shorts? And I'm like, what? And then I got what he was saying. It was just like, he's like, you guys seriously have a crystal ball over there. So it's kind of funny. And this was 2003 or so. So a long time ago. And yet, things were, if you have a current, society-based show, you're inevitably going to hit upon things that happen in real life. And, I think there were enough episodes where it happened a lot in The Simpsons. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's the mark of great writing, that you've on the shows you've worked on, that they're so in touch with society that they're able to actually see where society is going to head, possibly. Trying to get it right. Unfortunately, sometimes when you get it right, it's not the way you want to get it right.
No, because we had to reanimate everything.
Okay, we'll jump to our next poll question that should pop up on the screen. And while it is, I've got a very important question. Actually, one of our co-hosts is really interested in your answer to this one. Is it wrong for a vegetarian to eat an animal cracker?
No, I say go for it.
Okay, so we just got our results in, and the question was, which show should we talk about? The options were Family Guy, Rugrats, and or your favorite show, and your favorite show won. So my first question obviously is, what was your favorite show that you worked on?
That I worked on. Okay. So as a fan or as a production?
Whichever one you want to answer.
Okay. I think that my favorite as a fan I would have to say The Simpsons. And it's not that I don't love Rugrats or Family Guy or any of the other shows I've worked on. I have an affinity for all of them, and I get really into it when I work on it or whatever. But I think if I were to step back and sort of say, a show that really changed the way that we that we program. Simpsons was a first of its kind. I feel like Family Guy is clever and hilarious at times, and but it was a little derivative. It definitely took off from other shows before it. There were some sort of the whole even All in the Family part to it, kind of feel to it in the opening, etc. So, I feel like The Simpsons was so original and so unique, and yet so real, and and touched upon so many things, like we just talked about, with society, with people, with relationships, with personality types, with with real life issues, and so I just feel like it was not only just a great animated show. It was a great show. It is a great show. It still is incredible. But so I don't want to date myself, but I started working on it in 1989. So, so anyway, so I think that because it sort of was a first, and and established a whole new genre of animation, a genre of programming, show in general. It has such timeless, relatable characters and writing. It just, like, to me, that's just the best of all times for that reason.
So on that note, with Simpsons being your favorite to have been to be a fan of, what would you say is the difference really between working on the more adult material that you've worked on, like Family Guy and Simpsons, versus the more children-focused stuff that you've worked on, like Rugrats and all of the Cartoon Network stuff?
A lot more freedom. No, so when you're working on a primetime show, you're always trying to be edgier and shock a little more, and while towing a line. I mean, like, I can't, with Family Guy, I can't tell you how many times I got called into the writer's room and these guys are like, too far, What do you think? I was like their meter for, it's just like, it's like, no, guys, you can't do that. Or, yeah, go for it. It's hilarious. Why not? So, it's always about trying to be, to go further or top yourself or whatever. With kids shows, I think you create your lane of whatever it is, Phineas and Ferb or Johnny Bravo or Rugrats or whatever, and you have your world and your characters, and it's about just coming up with great stories and great you know uh, opportunities for the characters to develop and things like that. So it's less about trying to shock and be more daring and edgier, and more about just sort of taking the show where it needs to go. So and there's just a lot more rules. You can't do this, you can't do that. I mean, I remember with Rugrats, it was a nightmare. It was like, no, you can't have an exposed outlet next to the babies. It's like, oh
Wow.
you have to put them in a seatbelt, or just a lot of rules.
So more standards and practice down your throat.
Yeah, exactly. That part. Yep.
No, it's funny too. You're talking about the pushing the edge and all that, and it's actually something we study in law school and copyright classes. Is the fair use of Simpsons and Family Guy, and how much they're always pushing the edge of what they can and can't do. So it is fascinating to actually see the other side of it too.
Right. And I want to just say one more thing. I think that just popped in my head is when you said that, trying to push it or whatever. The one thing that I appreciate about The Simpsons is that and this is giving credit to the writers, is that it pushes the edge, but it doesn't do it just for the sake of pushing the edge, and it doesn't just try to shock you. It just and I like that about The Simpsons, that it sort of isn't, it doesn't go to that whole raunchy side of things that a lot of the primetime animation has sort of settled on at this point. The raunchier, the better, the whole Netflix said or whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so now we'll do our third poll on that note. So that's going to pop up, and while it does, I'm going to keep the theme going of the Simpsons. Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin?
They're kind of almost the same guy. I don't know. They're both these dumb idiots, but I guess Homer has a bigger heart.
Oh, okay.
I think Homer's a little sweeter. Like, he's a little more of a family guy. I don't know.
That's funny.
I know.
So our question was, do you want Sherry to share tips and insights on how she reached success early on, or to focus on the entertainment industry as a whole? And overwhelmingly, they want to hear tips for success. So on that note,
okay.
What early on helped you to get to where you are today? Specifically, do you believe that hands-on experience was important, a mentor, or something else?
Oh God, all of the above. So the first advice I would have in any situation and in any stage in our lives is just be open to opportunities. So for one thing, like, I wasn't going into entertainment. I grew up abroad. I grew up in Israel, and then Ivory Coast, Africa, and I didn't come here until I was 13. So I didn't grow up with the entertainment industry being like, oh, I want to be in entertainment, I want to be a producer or whatever. It wasn't even on my radar. And I was a girl who was good at math, and so I was kind of going that route. But what I didn't realize is that I was really creative as well. I always wrote poems and stories. I always, I played the piano, I painted. So there was a lot of creative in me, and I didn't realize that. And a lot of times we don't know things about ourselves. And I think being open to opportunities, trying different things, just teaches you about yourself. The other thing is, that I just realized by doing that, management and managing people, time, resources, whatever, was something that I was very good at. I was a natural born leader. I was organized. I was good with people. So it all sort of blended together to make me a good producer. But I wouldn't have thought of that. I wouldn't have necessarily known about it if I hadn't been open to opportunities. to your second point, I mean, mentors are everything. Relationships are everything. Mentors can come in the form of somebody above you, but they can also come in the form of colleagues, at your level or whatever. But I just think that, especially in the entertainment business, you just don't get anywhere if you don't have relationships with people, because people hire people they like, and they know, especially in the entertainment industry. And so, you learn from your mentors. You can lean on them. You can ask them for advice. They'll help you in so many ways to grow as a professional, and and recommendations and things like that. That very, very, very important. And I really, really, really work hard to make sure that I give back and that I'm a mentor to many others, because I feel like that really has helped me in my life, and I want to be able to be there for others doing that. And lastly, I would say just take initiative and always be better than you think you can be, and trust yourself to just do it. Because you just sit back and wait for people to promote you and to give you the opportunities or whatever. You're just not going to go as far as if you just actually take the initiative and just do things. I just oftentimes, like, how do you get promoted? You actually do the job, and then they'll go, well, you're already doing it. Let's get you there. So I think that would be my advice, as to how, things that helped me along the way.
Yeah, it's funny. You mentioned, the mentorship and the connections, and I always hear people say, it's who you know. And I think it's important to remind people, it's not who you know, it's who knows you in the industry. Just because you've talked to somebody before doesn't mean they remember you. It's the building the relationships that's important in order to move your career forward. And that's not the entertainment industry, it's every industry, really. I have a couple more questions because we are running out of time. Tying into your time abroad, you grew up in Israel. You are Jewish, of course, and that's why we're having you on the IAC. How has that affected your career positively? How has it helped you in your career, and how has it shaped your career?
I mean, I think, being Jewish helps you bond with other Jewish people, and it's an industry full of Jewish people. I wouldn't say that it's necessarily helped me in my career. Animation is not particularly Jewish, by the way. Entertainment in general is, like, a lot of the Fox execs and the executives, the lawyers, I mean, they're all Jewish, but animators typically aren't. So I think it was a mixed batch. But again, when you do meet someone who's Jewish, there's sort of an inherent bond that happens anyway, but beyond whatever other bond you might create. So
it's funny, the Rugrats Passover and the Rugrats Hanukkah was right after you left, right? Did you?
No, I worked on this.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
You mentioned the
Hanukkah. Angelica. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've avoided it for as long as possible, but we're almost running out of time, and I have to ask you about it. How do you see coronavirus, that's the C word for anybody that didn't pick that up earlier. How do you see coronavirus affecting the future of the industry in the short term and in the long term?
Well, so clearly, as we can see, it's affected the industry pretty severely, in that with social distancing, you can't, I mean, any live action show is affected by it. You can't have a crew. Every show requires a crew. You've got a cameraman, you've got the two grips around him, you've got the lighting guy, and they're like literally on top of each other. And then you've got the set designer and the set decorator and the makeup artist, and all those people are on top of each other. And there's 50, 60 people in whatever room you're shooting in or location you're shooting in. So crews are problematic, and therefore it literally put the entertainment industry to a halt on the live action side. Animation, on the other hand, is continuing seamlessly because it is now mostly digital, and artists can work at home on a setup. So the studios, basically, if they didn't already have a setup, the studio provided one and provided them with the software, and everyone's working at home. And it's all being put on the cloud and shared, and it's there's several Zoom calls a day, but it's happening.
Do you
So
see
that's
that?
been.
So I don't mean to jump in, but do you see that? I was thinking about that too. And do you see that possibly opening up the
So,
animation world to considering people from other countries and to actually working much more internationally with possibly increasing the level of animation because they're using a bigger pool now?
so that's already been happening, but it's now making it that much more seamless and easy because things are being figured out on how to do a virtual pipeline. But that's what I was going to say next is, so that's how it's impacted it immediately and already is impacting it. But I do think that, out of challenges arise opportunities and innovation. And I think that what's interesting is that people are realizing that so much can be done differently, and sometimes better, sometimes not, but that it is possible that we will have different kinds of productions, and that some things can be done virtually. I did see, I happened to watch American Idol, and they did announce that they're going to go ahead into the lives, but they're going to be broadcasting from 25 different locations. So I'm dying to see how innovative they got in order to solve the issue in front of them, which is, gee, what do we do? I know that in animation, for instance, one of the things that we weren't doing remote, obviously couldn't really do remote, was recording the actors, the voiceover. But now we have basically set up all our actors on, with home booths, and we're recording them digitally. So we have an engineer, and it's all patched in, and they're being recorded. So and that's been done for ages, recording. Because I remember when I was working on Duckman, one of our actors was on a movie set in Russia, and he and Jason Alexander who was Duckman, needed to like have a back and forth scene or whatever, and we patched him in from a studio. So he had to go to a studio over there in Russia, and we had Jason over in ours, and we kind of had them basically in real time record it. But now, like, you can just have a booth in your house. Pro Tools is like a pretty accessible program, and so we're able to record people remote. So I could see what American Idol will do is set them up in local studios to record their next thing. So anyway, I think that we're going to see a lot more innovation, and I think we are going to transform the way people work, based on the fact that we're sort of proving it can work this way.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I think that, there's a lot of positives that will come out of this. People realizing there's better ways to do things that we were just holding off on.
Yep.
So that wraps up our time, unfortunately, with this part. We're going to break out into breakout sessions now. The lucky winner is Danielle Ben-Shimon. Her and Sherry are going to get to have a little chat. I encourage everybody to have live discussions about what Sherry, the insights Sherry's provided, and when we rejoin in 10 minutes, I'd love to hear some thoughts from anybody that discussed the insights.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sherry.
So how do we do this next part? Oh, okay. Join.
Yeah.
Turns out her cousin's wife's brother is Daniel Benjamin. And I'm like, okay, so connected on Facebook and it said, oh, you know, I'm like, really? That's so funny. So when I said Danielle Benjamin, I'm like, is that the same person? So, how are you doing?
Good, thanks. How are you?
I'm from Boston. I was just impressed at the number of shows she was able to work on. Like, by what she described, I feel like she should be like 50.
That was an interesting part. Hey, Dustin.
מה אמרת?
Yeah, you know, it's amazing. She's really worked on so much of the animation that an entire generation grew up on and consumed.
So originally from Israel, this is my husband, Idan, next to me.
Hi.
So we moved from Israel to Boston actually 8 months ago.
בערך אחת לחודש ונפגשים לכל מיני מפגשים של גם פרופשיונל, גם חברתיים, גם נטוורקינג. היי דסטין. בדיוק שאלו אותי מה זה אדג', אתה רוצה להסביר אתה? דסטין הוא הדירקטור של אדג'
הייתי מאוד איתכם, אבל ניתן לך להמשיך כי אני צריך לעבור לחדר הבא.
אז ביי. תכיר את דסטין.
ביי דסטין.
ביי ביי.
זה בעצם אדג', אנחנו מאוד מאוד...
So many things. I don't have much to say more than that.
Okay. What about you?
I can also argue against that because it's like if you don't do what you really want to do, you'll never get there. So I think it's really a personal choice, and it depends how far does it take you off the path. But I think if you're, if there's a great opportunity, then you take it because the more you do, the more adept you are at different things, and the better you can take care of yourself throughout life. And
sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that I'm bringing you all guys back to the main session, okay?
Great,
Okay,
thank
you.
you. Of course.
That was the breakout session, Sherry.
That was great.
Good, awesome.
Yeah.
Anybody have any insight, any ideas, thoughts they'd like to share before we sign off? You can post them in chat. We'll give you guys a couple of seconds. While you're doing that, my last lightning round question relates to what you mentioned earlier, Harry Potter. If Voldemort offered you a hug, would you accept it?
Not today. We're on coronavirus, social distancing, no hugs.
Fair enough. Fair. Okay, I don't see any.
I loved the question.
Very cute.
Somebody wants to know where in Israel you live, Sherry, and what was your favorite?
I heard part of that. Where in Israel I lived, and then it cut out.
And your favorite memory from Israel?
I grew up in Holon, around Tel Aviv area, and then my favorite memory. You know, I actually remember just, you know, as a child being able to, you know, run out, and there were just like dozens of kids out in the park that was by our house, and it was just, you know, very free and fun and kid-oriented society, and I just, you know, have very, very fond memories from my childhood. Just playing outside with lots and lots of friends, and everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew everybody's parents, and, you know, parents knew all the kids, and, you know, it was just very much of like a big family. And I actually have a very big family there. I have 29 cousins. 3 of them are here, and 3 are in Paris, but the rest are all in Israel. So we do go back quite a bit, and you know, I'm pretty close to my uncles and aunts and my cousins, and who are all like amazing people. They've, you know, so I definitely love Israel.
You know, it's funny. I'm the same, similar story. I started out in Israel and moved to the States, and I have the same feeling. Is it felt much more like you could just go out on the street and just play with your friends, and
Right.
miss that here. Yeah. Okay, our last question. I think it's a really good one. Are there any specific characters that you grew to dislike or that you got attached to?
Ooh, characters I disliked. I really can't think of any. I mean, I kind of like Lisa Simpson. I sort of relate to her a little bit, like, but you know, I just, if I were to pick a Simpson, that's probably my person.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Sherry. I really appreciate it. I honestly could have probably spent another 2 hours talking to you, because we didn't even touch merchandising and all of your work, and, you know, the Beatrix dolls that you had mentioned and all of that. And just, there's so much more I would have loved to ask you about, but I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you all so much. And best of luck to everybody with this whole epidemic and beyond. So
Thank you. Everybody stay safe and healthy.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Rory.
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
I do.
Thank you.
Very enjoyable. And go Simpsons.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, I love the other shows too, but The Simpsons I just always loved.
Awesome. Take care, you guys.
Lisa is the best. She's the most misunderstood character. Don't really get her. She's trying her best.
Yeah.
She gets it right. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Justin, you want us to meet later? Want us-